It's now time for the big story, and this is usually a major current affairs story that is happening here in Jamaica or someplace in the world. And of course, the Prime Minister of Jamaica is under the microscope. Just to tell you that the Integrity Commission, the IC, investigated Prime Minister Andrew Holness's statutory declarations for 2019 to 2022, focusing on potential illicit enrichment and false statements. The investigation found insufficient evidence to support charges related to 4 bank accounts, but couldn't conclude on illicit enrichment due to unresolved questions about connected companies and lack of personal expense information. I definitely wanted to hear from Danielle Archer this morning. She is the principal director of the National Integrity Action, and she has consented to join me. First time I'm getting a chance to speak to her, and I really appreciate this. Thank you, and good morning, Danielle. How are you today?
Good morning, OGB. It's always a pleasure. I grew up listening to your voice. Actually hearing that I'm able to have this exchange with you is it's awesome.
Oh, so thank you. Thank you, and good morning once again. Danielle, take us to the beginning, the genesis of this problem. We'd have to say that the Prime Minister is in. How and when did it start?
All right. So the pickle that the Prime Minister has found himself in arises from the questions surrounding his statutory declarations. If you're in Jamaica or outside of Jamaica, you'd have heard that for at least 2 years, the Prime Minister's statutory declarations could not be certified. Mm-hmm. The statutory declarations are declarations that every public servant must sign and provide at the end of every year, indicating how much they have earned and what their expenditure like, what are their investments. And this is done to ensure that every public servant accounts for the job or office that they hold. It really does ensure that you're not using public funds for private gain. So the statutory declaration to the Prime Minister was not certified as it should have been for at least 2 years. And so there were questions. Why has it not been certified? Why has it not been certified? The Prime Minister, in exchange, comes out and says, I don't know why the Integrity Commission can't certify my declarations. Who is the Integrity Commission? The Integrity Commission was established by legislation many years ago to conduct the investigations and the review of statutory declarations and investigations into allegations of corruption, which is the misuse of public funds for private gain. There is no bribery act in Jamaica, so what they're mostly concerned about is whether or not they're using funds from the pocket, that there is monies coming that they can't explain how we do it. Jamaica does not have an unexplained wealth order. So a regular citizen or a Prime Minister is not called to say how it is that you have this extraordinary wealth. Well, this investigation took about 2 years to be conducted, and what they've said is we have concerns about the growth of the wealth of the Prime Minister. They examined his statutory declarations and they saw some omissions. He was called in and he was given an opportunity to explain why it is these omissions are there. To the extent where he was able to speak about the accounts belonging to his parents, the prosecutor or the head of the prosecution arm of the IC, Integrity Commission, has said, I don't have enough evidence to show that he intentionally omitted this information from his declarations, and so we can't charge him for that.
Yes.
However, that information that was on those declarations that he was asked to resubmit, so he was given that opportunity to resubmit it. When they got the second or the resubmission, the Integrity Commission's investigator asked more questions, and arising from the answers of the Prime Minister, it only asked him to ask more questions, caused him to ask more questions surrounding the payments for a bond, a $94,000 bond, which he says comes from my own own income, but then at the same time, it comes from a company that is registered or that the Prime Minister has connections with. There's inadequate explanation as to where he got this money to buy this bond. The problem with the bond, the principal, the interest, everything was connected to the Prime Minister. And when the Prime Minister was asked about it under the investigations, it became, this bond was it wasn't properly registered to me. But yet the statements and everything were allegedly sent to the Prime Minister, and he made no objections to all of this until the commencement of investigations. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's another thing that surrounds a loan to one of his companies for $50 million. When they look at the papers, whether it is supposed to be something that is collateral, what's the collateral? It appeared it's an unsecured loan. The problem, when you're protecting depositors' money and you're giving so much money and you're lending out so much money, there is a requirement to ensure that it is properly secured. And so there is not adequate documentation as it speaks to how it is that this company owned by the Prime Minister has been able to secure this loan. So there are other companies. There seems to be a commingling of funds between a charity he has and a company that he has. And what is instructive is that there seems to have been an attempt by the investigators to have him explain, give us an explanation in terms of your expenses so that we can square off, we can understand how it is that this money is coming and that wasn't forthcoming. Mm-hmm. So what we have this morning, Richie V,
yes,
is a conundrum. We have a conundrum which we have never experienced before. We now have a situation where the Integrity Commission has issued a report which has indicated that there are some questions, unresolved questions. They are unresolved because whilst they have information that demonstrates that there is a growth in the income of the Prime Minister that cannot be explained, the legislative authority of the Integrity Commission to do more, they don't have it. So they have to send it over now to the FID.
But
the FID...
There are some issues as far as that is concerned. What's your view on that referral?
Pretty, whilst I understand that there is a legislative constraint upon the Integrity Commission, mm-hmm, there is a reason why the Integrity Commission is tasked with investigating corruption. So whilst we have the MOU that was signed between the Integrity Commission and the FID to allow them to do that kind of investigation, which the IC does not have, the public is concerned. So no one is concerned about my opinion. The public is raising the concern that they are unsure. They're not too sure, not too confident that they are going to be able to get a fulsome investigation coming from the FID. This is because it really, even though it is said to be independent, and I use quotations, it is in fact a part of the Ministry of Finance. So whilst it appears on paper, mm-hmm, that there is no need for them to report, we understand the logics of life. And so these uncertainties where you are going to be investigating the big man, the head honcho on the island, the question is going to be and is there going to be strength, fortitude, vim, vigor, and vitality in that investigation that is going to be fearless? And the reasons we raise these questions and the public is raising these questions is because there is a heightened fear in Jamaica for victimization. There's a heightened fear that there is not going to be a willingness of persons to provide this information because we're talking about the head honcho. Mm-hmm. Now, I want you, Richard B. and listeners, to appreciate some of the concerns that we're having.
Tell us.
In the context where, for months, the Integrity Commission has been assaulted by parliamentarians. Questions arising from whether or not they're politicizing, it's a witch hunt. Steps have been taken to really castigate the Integrity Commission, so much so that there is a plan afoot to weaken the powers of the Integrity Commission as opposed to strengthening it. And when you see this report, you have cause to ponder if the reason for the assault on the Integrity Commission is because they knew all along that there was going to be and is this kind of evidence that demonstrates that there are questions and valid questions around the misuse of public funds for private gain in the absence of demonstrable, convincing evidence that these funds were obtained by your lawful income. Mm-hmm. And worse yet, we have other parliamentarians who are being investigated We are in a conundrum because never before in the history of our democracy have we had the head of the country and the spouse of the head of the country also being House Speaker. The problem that this created is that in this instance, this report was not only shared with the head of the Speaker of the House, but the Deputy Speaker as well, because it wanted, I believe the IC wanted to ensure that there was some amount of objectivity in the passing of this information. Now, when you have parliamentarians who are being questioned for illicit enrichment, the issue ought not to be whether or not they have yet been found guilty. The question is, have they demonstrated that they have integrity in the dealing or handling of public funds? And that is the conundrum that we're in. Jamaica doesn't have a code of conduct per se. We have a ministry paper that was passed in 2002 that tells them that a ministry paper that came out and not passed in 2002, which indicates certain expectations. NIA has been asking for a code of conduct that would indicate certain kinds of consequences for behavior such as this. And there has been no traction. The Ministry, I believe, of Legal and Constitutional Affairs had intimated that a draft was ready, but we've never seen this draft. When you put all these things together, Richie B, you ask yourself, what is this the motive for the reluctance to have a code of conduct? Is this the motive for trying to suppress the integrity reports and indicating that they won't be immediately tabled, but they will be sent to a committee to be reviewed before they come back to be tabled? NIA had to push back at that, and then civil society assisted and joined the fight. So all of civil society, not just NIA, was part of that conversation to say, no, you can't hide the reports, table them as soon as you get them. When you pull those strings together, you are wondering whether the motive was really because they knew about this report. We wake up this morning being unsure about the trust that we can have in our leaders today.
You have definitely clearly put things in context, and we all as host and listeners would have benefited from that. Thank you very much. But you've highlighted what I'd like to call some red flags, and these would seem to have far-reaching implications. Now, if not the FID to continue further investigations, where do we turn, and what next?
Well, we have no choice now because the Integrity Commission is not empowered by legislation to do these investigations. And what's next? You should look forward, unfortunately, to much more talk from the parliamentarians and a greater attempt, a more furious attempt to neuter the Integrity Commission. There was the comments made by one parliamentarian who had made certain recommendations to weaken the Integrity Commission. If you listen to the response of our Prime Minister, Dr. Holness, you get the sense that there is going to be attempts to do this. What I want our listeners and you to understand, Richie B, is that this is not a political issue. Where we are now is whether or not our politicians across the aisle will have the political dexterity to stand up and indicate that they are going to give the Integrity Commission the strength and the support it needs to ferret this kind of activity. Will it happen? Do you think the very politicians who are now going to be investigated by an entity that they cannot control are going to unify and give the support to the Integrity Commission and give them the powers to ensure that they can complete the job?
It's an interesting and very important question. What would you say are the potential consequences for whether the Prime Minister or for other public officials who might be found guilty of illicit enrichment?
When you say the word found guilty, as an attorney, we have to be mindful that that has not been the finding from this report.
Right. And
there has been no charge laid against the Prime Minister. All we have is the totality of what we call facts. They're facts. There's information that suggests a particular thing. Where we go, We do have the case of former Minister Royal Reid that has been languishing in our courts for more than 4 years. We do not have an anti-corruption court or a division of our court system that deals with these matters with any alacrity. We do not have the political will to ensure that these matters are adjudicated upon in a quick fashion to pass anything, to strengthen the Integrity Commission. So where do these matters always go, Richie B?
Wow, there are more questions than answers. But over the next weeks and months, outside of making appearances like this on radio and on the media, Danielle Archer, what might the National Integrity Action do in terms of continuing to expose and dissect and speak on these issues? What's your modus operandi going forward?
Well, what is important for our diaspora to recognize and for our Jamaican listeners to appreciate is you have witnessed over the last several months the strength of civil society. They have come out, whether it is in their small numbers, to support the demonstrations against the exorbitant increase in salaries. In fact, when you put that into the context now, you're even more flabbergasted at what is happening. You've seen that civil society has pushed back on some of the activities that were attempted by the government. What you will see more of now is a greater unison with us as we try to figure out how do we break this 171-page report down so that members of the public can understand. My colleague and sister NGOs are in discussions to prepare and present a workshop, seminar for the public, where we are going to break down this information and share it so that you can make what of you will of what is in this report. Mm-hmm. So it's fresh days yet. The report came out on Tuesday. I know there are persons who are saying they haven't heard from these organizations. We need to read this report and dissect it. It is intense. Mm-hmm. So we are going to be breaking it down for our listeners, our public, our supporters, and general citizenry in many ways. And we are going to be using this as a platform, which would be as far as the National Integrity Action is concerned, to start a conversation around the support of an anti-bribery act and to see if we can push for support for a national anti-corruption strategy. Mm-hmm. There is this requirement that the Integrity Commission has started that they're expected to do. We haven't seen much happening on that landscape, and the National Integrity Action is committed to a national anti-corruption strategy. We have to get to that point where we change the culture from accepting such acts of corruption as being the norm. Mm-hmm. And we have to do something to change how we see these things. And we are going to be launching in very short order a campaign to get the public aware and sensitized about the importance of bribery, the importance of supporting anti-corruption strategies, and really getting our people to understand that the reality is when you cannot properly account for public funds, it is the people who suffer. Mm-hmm. Our classrooms have remained the same antique way from the last 30 years. I don't know if you've been back to your old school, but not much has changed in terms of the structure in the classrooms. There's no AC in many of these classrooms. Right. You know, when we cannot explain what is happening to our public funds, we have hospitals that don't have x-rays, CT scans. We have roads that can't be properly fixed because we are not spending the money the best way possible. Yes. So we're going to be launching this campaign coming off the heels of this. And we're also going to be having a connection with other sister NGOs to try breaking down this information to demonstrate how important it is that we keep the support behind the Integrity Commission and to strengthen it rather than weaken it. All
right. We pledge our support as you go forward. And before you go, where can persons listening actually follow, maybe on social media, to get updates that you might be publishing or posting?
We will post we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, I understand. We are on Facebook. We are now refreshing our page. And as part of our campaign, our anti-bribery campaign, we are going to be doing things a little bit differently. So You can look out for the campaign. We will look out for your suggestions as to how you think we could be more effective in getting the public on board. So we can send us your emails, post your suggestions. This is a matter, Richie B, not for NIA. It's not a matter for JAMP. It's not a matter for Richie B. This is where we are calling on all Jamaicans. This is not a question about sending donations. This is a question of a fight for our life. We are in difficult times. Mm-hmm. The fear of the thing itself is the fear that we don't want to call out that our democracy can be challenged when we have leaders who do not account for their earnings. And so this is a matter for all Jamaicans to come on board and in your own way, dispel, shred, cuss out, do away with any act of corruption in whatever form. We need this coalition, and we need this coalition to begin at the ground, because it cannot be that we're going to have politicians on both sides who come together, coalesce to try to see if they can destroy the very thing that is to protect the interest of the public. This is a time for every citizen to get on board and ask themselves, what can I do to reduce acts of corruption in the land of their birth or the land that they love and support? So we look forward to this coalition that is going to begin from the ground. Mm-hmm. We must start it somewhere. And listen, it's not asking the Prime Minister to resign, and it's not calling for an election. It is getting our parliamentarians to understand that integrity and honesty are the most valuable components, not to be spoken about, but to be acted upon by every member of our political class.
Absolutely. Danielle Archer, it was such a pleasure talking with you. I know you have an engagement. You set it back, your departure, that is, to speak with me. I'll allow you to go. Have a safe journey.
Yes. In another parish.
Have yourself a safe day, a wonderful day. And thank you very much.
You
all right, bye-bye.
Have a safe one, and all the best to you.
Much appreciated. Danielle Archer, ladies and gentlemen. She is the principal director of the National Integrity Action, the NIA. And you heard her perspectives. What are your thoughts on that, listeners? I want to hear from you. 876-861-4753. That's 876-861-4753. There's also 877-255-3086. That's 877-255-3086.